How's it going, everyone? I'm back. I've been off the radar for quite a while. It's been a long time since I've uploaded a video, but I'm back and I'm excited. I got some fun projects that I'm excited to do. One of them I haven't done before, so I'm excited to see how it turns out. This one has to do with making forests and trees for your tabletop games. And normally I have these kind of forests that I make. Just kind of standard clumps of trees with grass and bushes, which looked great on the battle map. But when there's other times where, depending on the story, you have like a large, magnificent tree of some kind, and so I kind of want to get bigger and larger and more like a mysterious type of tree. So that's going to be our project today, and we'll see how it turns out. Like I said, I haven't done one of these before, so let's cross our fingers and see how it goes. So here's some of the materials we'll be using, excluding the paint, which will come later. But these are all materials that are relatively cheap. You can get just about anywhere. Hot glue gun, you can usually find them pretty cheap unless you want like one of the super high quality ones. Of course, toilet paper rolls and cotton you can get just about anywhere. But a lot of this is really cheap and on a budget. And so these are going to be our materials, and we're going to try to make a giant tree. So let's figure this out. So to start off, we're going to get our cardstock, and a little trick I've learned is if you put a little line on the toilet paper with a pen or a pencil, you can match it to the edge and roll it for your measurement. Just be careful not to bump or scoot it around too much. And once you find it, I always like to give a little excess. And we're going to make the roots of the tree. And here we're just going to have a random pattern, kind of zigzag, almost like lightning bolt type shapes. And then we're going to painstakingly cut them out. And we're going to trim the top part here, and you're going to want to save that piece you cut off there, that long piece. Trimming it up just a little bit and cutting some wavy length patterns on it as well. And we're going to hot glue gun this guy. But first there's a couple little holes I made in there for hollows in the tree. Dropping our hot glue gun on this guy. We're going to put a little bead around it along the base. And then we're going to be sticking our root system to it. And you want to do this relatively quick before that hot glue dries, so just have your materials ready to go. We're going to run along over this with the hot glue to kind of hide that seam a little bit and give it some extra strength. Next, we're going to put some lines going down across it so that it has a natural tree look to it, because tree, the bark grows up and down. And you don't want it to have that back and forth look. And catching some of the drips and stuff is important as well. Next, we're going to use that piece that I said to save earlier, and you're going to use that to have your branches. And so here's another kind of example. I'm going to use a nice little black marker here to give me some better lines. And we're going to fill this guy out. Of course, you can see now that we're done, I've added a couple smaller ones in the middle in between. And it's okay if they're really close together. Remember, you're going to be bending it into a circle, so it's going to fan out a little bit. So if everything's kind of jumbled in there and tight, that's okay. It's going to look great afterward. So we're going to cut this guy out, and this is even more painstaking than the roots, but it's going to look fantastic. One thing I learned that I would recommend is definitely making the upper branches a bit thicker. You'll see why here later on. There's a little bit of a trick to this, but like I said, this is our first time doing it, so we're experimenting. So now we're gonna hot glue the top of this tree, and we're gonna be gluing it really quickly to the branches, getting them on there. Making sure it's sealed nice and tight. And then we're going to be adding, like we did on the bottom part, we're going to be closing up this seam. and then finishing it off with adding those up and down kind of ribs to kind of give it the bark type effect. And we're going to continue with this pattern down the trunk at this point, just kind of filling it in really heavy. And don't be shy about this part. Really use a lot of glue. You're going to use a lot of this glue. Kind of trace around those holes where the hollows in the trees are. It's going to really make it look like a knot or a hole in the tree. It's going to be awesome. And then filling in any gaps or cracks you have, making sure there's not too many gaps that are open in the tree as well. It's going to look like gnarly bark. Now we're going to bend these roots up. Splay them out so that it sits flat relatively. Get our wood chips. This is going to help kind of weigh down the base and give it a strong hold for the tree roots. Trace around it with the hot glue gun. And watch your fingers on this stuff because it's hot. So glue the tree to the base. It's got nice weight to it, so it won't tip over during gameplay. We're going to bend these roots around the base, give it a nice seamless look. And then we're going to take the hot glue gun and we're going to glue the roots to the wood itself. Once those are in place, you can fasten them in. Make sure they're staying flat. And then we're going to be going over the roots with more of the hot glue. Kind of tracing over them, giving them more of a 3D look instead of just being flat. And then filling in some of the gaps on the root as well. Here I got some wax paper, thinking this would be a great idea to put the hot glue on so I could go a little over the lines per se, and kind of just give it a really cool gnarly root system look and just go crazy with this hot glue. Starting off going left to right on this, and then I move to the up and down strokes on this so that it kind of gives that bark type effect as well. And I'm letting it bleed onto the wax paper just a little bit. While that's drying down below, we're going to be taking the branches and separating them at the top and bending them downward. And here you can see they kind of fan out real nice. So we're going to be bending them around and kind of twisting them, just kind of getting them to be less flat and more like actual branches would be on a tree. And be careful too, because these are a little flimsy and you don't want to tear them. We'll be reinforcing them later with the glue. But here's the mistake I made. The wax paper did not work so well. I'm not sure exactly what I did wrong, but it was kind of a mess. But it came off all right in the end, and through it all, it ended up turning out pretty good, and it looks pretty great. So the next step is going to be pushing the branches in a little bit more and folding them inward. And we're going to be grabbing one of our wood tokens and we're going to be placing it on the center of these branches. So we're going to need the hot glue on the center and then place that guy in the middle. And then gluing it around to give it some strength. This will give a little bit of some more weight, but also a little support. So if characters want to perch on top of the tree, they have a place to stand. Adding in some of this glue here. Putting it on pretty thick so it stays strong. And you're going to need a lot of glue, so I recommend grabbing a pack of glue because, like I said, you're going to go through a lot of it. And here we're just going to be kind of putting in some swirls here so that it looks like the inside of a tree. Adding some strength to these branches. Like I said, they do get pretty brittle here later on, so I would recommend, if you're going to do the branches, either get a thicker type of paper. Cardstock is pretty thick, but either get a thicker paper or reinforce it with something more glue or maybe some toothpicks on the larger part of the branch. That's a little tip I think I'd give to anyone who's wanting to do this project. Just be careful with the branches. Here I'm reinforcing them underneath and above, and even through all of that, they were still pretty frail. But in the end, I think I got it to the spot I liked, and I think it's coming along real nice. Good enough that you can put a nice piece of cotton on there for the leaves, which we're going to be doing later. And here, turning the tree over and just doing the underside of the branches a little bit more. I just needed to do more reinforcement for this. So a little bit of foresight, just be prepared for that. Making sure those branches are really good and reinforced, and that you're not gonna break it if you drop it on the floor. Now we're ready to do some paint. We're gonna do a black coat over the entire tree first of all. And we're gonna let it dry before we put our brown coat over. So while that dries, we're gonna move on to the next step, which is making the foliage. So the top of this tree here, we're going to be getting a big wad of cotton and our green paint, this dark green color, mixing it into this little paint pan I have, soaking the cotton in there. And this is the kind of cotton you can get at any fabric store or craft store. It just comes in a huge bag and you can pull clumps of it out. And as you're mixing the paint in there, you're gonna make it into one nice big solid piece that's painted. You just gotta really squish the paint around in there to get it to all the inner parts. If you are going too fast, you're gonna have some white coming through. And so you wanna make sure you mash it in real good and separate the cotton just a little bit so it's not one big clump. And then you're gonna wanna pull out some of the weird pieces that kind of clump together that don't look natural. Kind of clean it up just a little bit and pull it apart. Once you get it to how you like it, you're gonna set it off to the side to dry. It might take an hour or more for it to completely dry all the way through. And it's testing it out there. Looks like it's coming along real well. Now we're gonna put a brown coat of paint over it, just lightly brushing it over so that we get some variation in colors. And there it is. I like it. I think it turned out quite all right. It's great that you can kind of have the more dead, mysterious tree, maybe in like a swamp or something, or if you just want the big tree, full foliage, just magnificent looking, maybe like an elven tree of some kind. But yeah, it was a fun project. I think maybe adding some more branches or something would also be awesome for this type of a project. But it was a fun one. I honestly had a lot of fun making this one. It was different, very unique, but I'm quite happy with the results. I can't wait to put this on the table and use it for my next campaign. So thanks for joining. And like I said, it's good to be back. I'm excited for the project lists I have been saving up this whole time, and I'm excited to share them with you guys. So that's it for today. But until we meet again.